Within hours of America and Israel launching a surprise war in Iran, people noticed something strange. No one could tell us the answer to a simple question. Why? Why did they start this war?
Overnight, the United States and Israel began striking targets inside Iran.
The Department of War launched Operation Epic Fury, crippling Tehran's leadership by taking out Iran's supreme leader.
We're going to annihilate their navy.
Together with the United States, we will strike the terror regime harshly.
And when they did start giving explanations, the answers all contradicted one another.
I don't understand what the confusion is. Let me explain it to you.
Some people took this to mean that they were hiding the real answer, whatever that was. Or that there was no answer, that it was just Trump acting on impulse. But I have been spending a bunch of time looking into this, and I actually think it's neither of those things. I think the real reason behind this war that's already killed hundreds of innocent people, sent the global economy into a tailspin, plunged the Middle East into a firestorm, is something that's messier and more complicated than how we typically think of wars as starting. Unpacking what that is tells us a lot about why this war is really happening. And it reveals some big, uncomfortable truths about how wars happen generally in our world, how they come together, how this one came together, and where this one in particular is headed. We're going to use this board over here to try to answer the question that the architects of this war either can't or don't want to tell us. What kind of war this is? What is its goal? Which means also answering who set things on the path to war to try to accomplish that goal, and where that strategy will take Iran, what that intended result would look like. And we'll start with the answer we've heard a lot from Trump himself. Like in this interview he gave a few hours after the war started, where he called what we did in Venezuela the perfect scenario for Iran, which he said meant replacing Iran's leadership with someone new who would be friendlier to the United States. So, okay, we're going to say Venezuela as the desired result. And it's worth refreshing on what happened there. The US and Venezuela, remember, have had hostile relations for many, many years. Then Trump, this January, sort of out of nowhere, launched a special forces raid to capture Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife.
The United States of America has successfully carried out a large-scale strike against
Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro and his wife.
But, and this is important, this was not regime change. Venezuela's political system, it stayed in place. Instead, Maduro's vice president just took over and cut some modest trade deals with Trump.
Que juremos como un solo país para sacar adelante a Venezuela en estas horas terribles.
There's even some reason to believe she might have been in on it. A couple months earlier, the Miami Herald had reported that she had quietly pitched Trump on helping her to take over from Maduro. Again, that's not regime change. Regime change is toppling an entire political order. Venezuela's government, official ideology, ruling elite are all the same, just with the new face. So we'll call this leadership change as the goal of the war. Which is to say, just slot in a new leader at the top without changing much else in Iran. And Trump has said over and over that this is what he wants to do there.
He said there is a plan. He points to Venezuela.
I said, how's that going to work? And he said, it's going to work very easily. It's going to work like it did in Venezuela.
And sure enough, American and Israeli airstrikes killed Iran's top leader at the very start of the war. Trump is already saying he wants to be the one to pick Iran's next leader, and that he even already has 3 options in mind. The question of who is pushing the strategy is pretty easy to answer, because as we will see, lots of powerful people have been involved in bringing this war about, but only one is citing Venezuela as the goal: Donald Trump himself. And the best answer for why Trump wants this, what he sees this model, and therefore this war, as meant to accomplish, we actually got answered by a close confidant of his who tried to talk him out of the war, Tucker Carlson.
So I call over there to see, call someone who knows him to see. I said, I'm just going to fly up anyway and tell him this because I think it's so important. And the person says, don't bother, because he's being shown polling that this war is like a 90-10 win for him.
So the poll in question is probably this one by a pro-Trump group called Vandenberg, which said 94% of self-identified MAGA support the war. The poll used super leading questions, it doesn't matter. The point is, it seems like Trump favored war with Iran, at least in part because he thought it would be popular, probably because his poll numbers are bad, his party is on track to lose the midterms, and it seems like he thought the best way to accomplish that was by quickly toppling Iran's leader, letting them elevate a new one and getting out, just like in Venezuela. But you look at this war, and we're not getting a quick little 4-hour operation to change out one nameplate and juice the president's polls. Which is weird, right? Trump is the head of the country leading the war, yet we are seemingly not doing his desired version of it. It's the first hint that something strange is going on here, and we're going to fill out the rest of this board to try to find out what that is. So I did not travel to Russia for this video. Bear with me, I promise this is relevant. But it was about 10 years ago on a reporting trip there that I first started using NordVPN, the sponsor of this video. It offered a way to safely and securely access email and the internet in an environment where that was hard to guarantee, but really important. But nowadays, that's not just a concern for reporters in hostile environments. It's something we all need to care about. Turning on Nord's Threat Protection Pro helps protect me from AI-assisted phishing scams, invisible malware, fake online storefronts, compromised Wi-Fi networks, and stuff I probably haven't even thought of. It's easy to use and has gotten even easier than it was when I first installed it in 2014. Go to nordvpn.com/maxfisher and use code maxfisher to get a big discount on the 2-year plan plus 4 additional months free. It's totally risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no reason not to try it. That's nordvpn.com/maxfisher, link in the description. Now, back to our video. It's the first hint that something strange is going on here, and we're going to fill out the rest of this board to try to find out what that is, starting with this other pretty different explanation we got.
The goal of this operation is to change the threat, not the regime. When this operation is over, no matter who takes over in Iran, they will not have ballistic missiles.
That's Senator Lindsey Graham. And his answer that the real goal here is just to blow up Iran's military hardware also showed up in a bunch of White House statements, like this one. See? Destroy its missiles, nuclear facilities, and naval ships. So what do we call this? Let's just say destroy weapons as this other stated explanation for the war. This is another more limited kind of war, and one with a long history in American foreign policy. Here's Reagan announcing attacks on Libyan military assets in '86.
At 7 o'clock this evening, Eastern Time, air and naval forces of the United States launched a series of strikes.
Clinton announcing attacks on the same thing in Iraq, 1998.
Earlier today, I ordered America's armed forces to strike military and security targets in Iraq.
You get the idea, and Israel has done a lot of this too. So let's put down Iraq 1998 when Clinton bombed it as the seemingly desired model here for Iran. The result is usually a few blown up military buildings, and this is definitely happening in Iran, like this base outside of Tehran. But if we want to understand why, then our question is who pushed for this version of the war? And the best answer might come from this Washington Post report that says Saudi Arabia's leader secretly called Trump multiple times to urge him to attack Iran, the goal of weakening Iran's military with airstrikes before that military could become any stronger. So it seems like at least one of our answers as to who is behind this version of the war is the Saudi leader Mohammed bin Salman, MBS. Let's put him up there. And the Saudis kept their role secret because they didn't want to risk provoking a prolonged regional war that could hurt them. But that is exactly what we got, right?
Today, Iran took aim at ships in the Strait of Hormuz.
Iran has begun laying mines.
The global price of oil skyrocketing. At least 6 ships targeted in the last 24 hours.
So how did a war that these two leaders both wanted to keep small and short instead turn into this? Well, there's one person we haven't heard from yet. This is a speech Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave on Israeli TV a week into the war, where he said he wanted to liberate Iran and that he had a systemic plan to destroy or destabilize its entire political system and government. Netanyahu has been pushing this forever. Here he is addressing Congress in 2002.
Obviously, we like to see a regime change, at least I would, in Iran, just as I would like to see in Iraq.
And here he is last year, telling Iranians that if they overthrow their government for him, he would reward them by fixing their country's water crisis.
The moment your country is free, Israel's top water experts will flood into every Iranian city, bringing cutting-edge technology and know-how.
Okay, so on this third goal for war, let's start by putting Netanyahu up here. But what do we call the thing that he is saying he's trying to accomplish? Since the war started, he's been playing this word game where he says, I'm not after regime change. How could you say I'm after regime change? I'm just doing a bunch of stuff.
כדי זה, ברור שהמשטר הזה מתערער. אנחנו פוגעים גם במטרות שלטון, בסמלי שלטון. ראיתם את זה, תחנת השידור ועוד...
That might coincidentally happen to bring about the regime change I've been calling for more than 20 years.
החלפת השלטון או נפילת השלטון הזה היא קודם כל העניין של העם האיראני. אין תחליף לדבר הזה. ולכן אני לא הצגתי את זה כמטרה, זה יכול להיות תוצאה, אבל זה לא מטרה מוצהרת או פורמלית שאנחנו...
So, okay, here's the thing about the name regime change, which I have always found really misleading. Because when we say regime change, we are not just referring to the act of changing out a few leaders. We're talking about destroying an entire political system and imposing a new one in its place that will do what we want. That sounds, to me, more like conquest. You could say it sounds like what America did to Germany and Japan in 1945, or what it did to Iraq in 2003. Let me show you.
We have no ambition in Iraq except to remove a threat and restore control of that country to its own people.
Evil regime, check. Liberation, check. Bring freedom, check. And guess who else was talking up Iraq regime change back then?
If you take out Saddam's regime, I guarantee you that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region.
But uprooting a country's entire political system is a huge task. In Iraq, the US spent years fighting town by town to destroy that old order and install a new one. I'm not saying I think they're also planning a full occupation of Iran like that. What I'm saying is that where they want to end up does require destruction on that scale. And you are already seeing this in Iran, where they are bombing huge numbers of police stations, government offices. And this is where we start to see how all of these different agendas interact with one another to produce the war that we got. This is an interview with Senator Lindsey Graham, the guy we saw earlier talking about missiles. He says that he spent months talking Trump into war with Iran, even flying back and forth to Israel to coordinate with Netanyahu and with Israeli intelligence on how to maneuver Trump toward that war. And sure enough, Trump's own inner circle said to the Washington Post that Netanyahu told Trump he was going to attack Iran's missile program, which convinced Trump his only course of action was to join in that attack. Trump's Secretary of State has said this too.
We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties.
So this is weird, right? Netanyahu wanted to do this, total conquest, a huge war, but Trump just wanted to do this, Venezuela option, 3-hour operation. So they settled on this whole other thing, bombing Iran's weapons, but the war that we are ending up with is that third biggest option. Listen to Lindsey Graham here just a few days after he'd claimed that the goal was just bombing Iran's weapons.
The regime is in a death row now. It is going to be on its knees. It's going to fall.
Sure enough, we pretty quickly got to a place where Trump wanted to back out of the war. His agenda is sort of done. But Israel is keeping the US pulled in by sticking to its goal of regime change. So sure, part of what's happening is that the people who wanted conquest, like Netanyahu, lied about that to try to get the war started. But there is something more fundamental at play here that is keeping things locked in place. Imagine the severity of war as a ladder. You have little small-scale stuff down here and bigger conflicts up here. If everyone just fights this kind of war, that's where it stays. But if even just one country escalates the kind of war it's fighting, even if it's sort of shifting up and down or leaving things ambiguous, that forces the other sides to fight at the top of that scale too. Don't bring a knife to a gunfight, right? It's forcing everyone else to move up the scale to match it. And this upward pull has a name. It's called escalation dynamics. And this is a hard-coded law of nature. It will get you every time. Which brings us to this last column on the board. I left it open to represent an even bigger kind of war. Here, see for yourself. This is Tehran, and those fires are from Israel bombing huge oil refineries. Here's another view. Israel has been bombing dozens of civilian power facilities in Iran, even over US objections that plunging ordinary Iranians into darkness could backfire. And that burning fuel is even flowing into canals that run alongside Tehran's city streets, which looks like this. Pushing Iran's largest city into darkness accomplishes enormous harm to its 10 million civilians and not much else. But even if it did serve some military purpose, it is above all a step towards collapsing this poor but functioning society into a failed state. And that process has a name: state collapse. The closest analog that I can think of for this is another country on Iran's border, Afghanistan. Boy, I'm actually noticing a lot of countries on Iran's border here. I wonder why they're developing so many weapons programs. And just to refresh, when the US invaded in 2001 to topple the government that had sheltered the architects of September 11th, the result was also to collapse all of the country's basic institutions down to the level of the village, turning it into a failed state. And all of that hunger and displacement and collapse into lawless, ungoverned anarchy opened a vacuum that extremist groups rushed in to fill. So why on earth would Israel or the United States want that in Iran? Look at this Trump post from a week into the war. Iran had shut down international oil flows, damaging the US and world economies, so Trump threatened to destroy Iran as a nation so that the country could never be built back. That is state collapse. So, okay, who is behind this one? Who do we put in this spot on the board? Well, kind of no one. Trump's truth social spasms aside, no one in a position to shape the war has given us reason to believe that they really sincerely want to turn Iran into a failed state. Maybe there is someone pushing this behind the scenes. It's definitely possible. But I think the truth might be something even scarier, which is that no one is pushing it, and it is happening anyway. Remember this escalation graphic? Well, state collapse would be even further up that ladder. So if one country starts moving in that direction, even if it's just to scare the other side, that is what the war becomes. So let's take a step back and look at this. What kind of war is this? Well, it's 4 different kinds of war, launched for 4 different reasons on behalf of a few different actors with very different agendas, and each pulling Iran and the conflict towards 4 very different end states. Which gets to a bigger point I want to make here about war in general. We like to think the way it works is that there's one person in charge and they make a big, bold decision, and maybe the reasons are good or maybe they're bad, but they have reasons, they have an end goal in mind, that's what they're pushing for, and it's all very logical. But the truth is that any war is brought about and sustained by a coalition, not just one person, even if it's just a coalition of individual officials within the same government. Let me show you what I mean. A couple years ago, on the 20th anniversary of the Iraq War, I did this story asking a bunch of historians why it had happened. And all the evidence, they said, pointed to one thing. A bunch of different senior Bush officials all came to the table wanting war for different reasons. And even one of the chief architects of the war, Paul Wolfowitz, admitted that they settled on destroying weapons of mass destruction as the mission really just because it was the thing they could all agree on. So even though most of them didn't care about the WMD stuff and a lot of them knew it wasn't even real, that was the war they ended up fighting. One of the people in that room, Richard Haas, later said, it was an accretion, a tipping point. A decision was not made, a decision happened, and you can't say when or how. This is a lot more typical than you would like to think. Which means when we look at any war, including this one with Iran, and ask who made the decision to start it, sometimes the answer is no one decided. At least not in the way we like to think of there being a single directive and end goal in mind. And with no one decision on why and what the purpose of the war is, that means there's no decision on how, on what kind of war gets waged, or how to win it. Which brings us to another lesson here, which is that wars waged for unclear or confused reasons usually just escalate and escalate forever. Confused wars become forever wars. Even if it were a good idea to turn Iran into Venezuela or Bush-era Iraq or into Afghanistan, and look, just to level with you, I do not think that any of those are a good idea, but even if you did, trying to accomplish all of them at once means you don't really accomplish any of them, right? And you just get pulled further and further up that escalation ladder. I know this is a picture of war and geopolitics very different from how we normally picture them or like to picture them. It's messy and it's bureaucratic. It's a handful of personalities, some of whom might not even know what they want, triangulating off of each other for short-term gain and least common denominator compromises. Setting in motion events they can't control that might have devastating consequences for millions of people that reverberate out for generations, which is how we ended up with a war with Iran, with no unified agenda behind it, no strategy, no defined end state. The more we learn about how it came about, the less we can say about the actual purpose of why it's happening, what all this death and destruction is even for. And that may be the most core truth of this war.